Hannah Stewart-Gambino joins us on the program. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And a unique perspective that you bring to the table, having gone faculty administrator, faculty again.
Correct.
So you bring the different aspects to it, and I just wonder sometimes, as a faculty member, not being administrator, did they, and I don't want to oversimplify and put everybody in one group, but does the faculty, by and large, feel represented in decisions on campuses?
Honestly, I think you have to, wow, there are over 4,000 campuses, and there's faculty and faculty and
sure.
decisions and decisions. I do think that faculty, it makes me nervous to lump people together.
Is there good symmetry there between the two? By and large?
Let me just make some large claims,
Sure.
and then I'll start backtracking from it. I do think that there are real challenges around governance, and I think it's probably broadly shared with faculty that the pressures, the business pressures, the pressures of access, the pressures of inclusion, the pressures of compliance, the pressures of a diversification of kinds of students has forced administrations into a much more rapid decision-making environment, and that makes it harder to include faculty. The proportion of faculty who are kind of traditional tenure track, place-based, they're going to spend their lives there, that's decreased over time. So I think there are a lot of factors that make it harder on all sides to have as deliberative and inclusive a decision-making process as might have been true 40 years ago.
Yeah. So it's a very different face now, but because, and we've talked throughout these different conversations that we've had earlier, one of the things that gets repeated time and time again is how quickly things change. The technology changes. The needs of the students change. The space needs to change. So I would think that's tough to keep up with, on top of an administrator needing to make decisions quickly.
I think that's right. And sadly, I think what happens often is that technology often becomes the conversation as though that's the end itself and not that it's a tool towards some end that remains an educational one. So I think, and the same with the business model, so that those end up being conversations that are so driven by the kind of time pressure that the point of it all, which is really sort of where integrated planning is of use. The point of it all, particularly the education, and that faculty members are alone typically in a classroom in what I would argue is a relationship business, not an information transmittal business, but a relationship business. And that's true of all of our students.
And I ask you about the relationship between faculty and administration. As a professor of international affairs, relationships kind of your gig anyway.
It is kind of our gig anyway.
So I figured you'd have some keen insight.
Well, education is not so fundamentally different because human nature is not so fundamentally different. Our technology is different. Our tools are different. The workforce that we are sending our graduates into might be different, but the meaning of work and the nature of humans, that stuff's pretty perennial. And so I think the speeding up of the decision making and the challenges of being able to do it really in an integrated way often does leave faculty out, and I get it. I don't think that's out of any evil intent. And I'll just make one other point about this, which is really a passion for me, which is the point of it all is still an academic vision. Mission, vision, values, that's the stuff that drives strategic plans. The people who ought to be at the center of that typically are provosts and presidents because it's the academic mission and vision and values of the institution.
Right.
Those people came up through the faculty. So if we're not deliberately building capacity amongst faculty, the people who are going to take those positions, then you end up in a situation where the other vice presidents or the other people who need a decision roll their eyes and think, oh, man, we've got to train this guy up. So I think that sort of capacity building piece is also a missed opportunity.
Well, I think
faculty.
you have a tough job because
it's tough.
It's hard to listen to the voices of many.
Right.
and pull that together. And the voice that you hear the loudest that I think is going to continue for the next decade or so is technology, because it's ever changing.
Right.
And everybody's always talking about it. Products change. The minute you talk about, let's say, a short throw projector in a conference room, that technology has changed by the time you buy the equipment.
Right.
So all that conversation's going to that as opposed to the faculty.
I think that's right. I do think that conversation has shifted a bit recently, because I would say 10, 15 years ago, the conversation was around the optimism that somehow technology would make us more efficient and go to the bottom line of the business. And I think we've realized that that's not true.
So how do you grab the microphone and keep it? How do you do that? I'm just curious how the faculty keeps it and keeps that voice where your voice is heard, because there's so many other signals being sent from a variety of different sources as you go through that integrated planning process. So how do you not get lost?
Just to find the you. You, the faculty member, you, the institution.
You, the faculty member.
You, the faculty member.
The ones that are not being heard the loudest.
Right. Well, that is a faculty governance issue, kind of writ large. And at the minute you say faculty governance, people's eyes kind of glaze over, because it sounds quite arcane. I do think, if you think about it from the perspective of a graduate student, someone just about to enter the profession, they too are sped up. Tenure and promotion, publication standards, will I get a tenure track job? Am I going to be able to pay my rent? Can I have a family? These are the kinds of things that are pressures for people in the faculty as well. So I think governance, I think a big part of this is actually the leadership of a campus, to the extent that most education is still built out of a campus environment. It is still place-based, and it's place-based in a way that administrations want as well. You need people to stay loyal to your brand because you want to raise money from them later, right? So part of that, I think, is administrations really understanding that building faculty, building their capacity to be part of this conversation, and remembering that for most people you want to raise money from, it is their experience with that faculty member. It's this moment when somebody said, look, because we are this institution, this is the relationship that I want to have with you. I think there are very real reasons to include faculty. I do think a lot of that comes from the top. That said, because it sounds like I've just punted and said it's not our responsibility, I do also think it's the responsibility of faculty to not to serve on committees, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
What I really mean is that I think it's important for faculty to remember that sort of performing their own governance is enormously important. Whether or not at any individual moment it actually matters, the performance of it makes it something that is still there for you when it does matter.
Is it easier for a small campus of, say,
Yes.
1,500 students, 2,000 students?
Yeah. But I've participated, for example, in trying to rewrite constitutions of faculty governance. There's nothing magical about it. Senates are not magically better than committees of the whole. I'm getting into inside baseball. But there's no structure that is magical. Jefferson said we ought to rewrite our own Constitution of the United States every 7 years, mostly so we just have to think through it again. So being committed to the role that we play and being attentive to the structures, sometimes just upsetting the apple cart makes you have to think about it again.
Wow.
It's the right thing to do.